In a Hong Kong neighborhood hardest hit by battles between protesters and police, voters in Mong Kok cast last-minute ballots, just moments before the polls closed on a record-breaking day for Hong Kong elections, the highest voter turnout ever. After nearly 6 months of violent demonstrations, the polling was seen as a way for voters to officially take sides in this deeply divided city of 7 million. Back the pro-Beijing candidates and the Hong Kong government, or those who support greater democratic freedoms for Hong Kong, in line with the protesters who have been fighting to push back on what they see as an increasing control from mainland China.
This election means a lot to Hong Kong. The older generation hopes for stability, while the younger generation hopes for change.
I think more people are actually coming out to vote to have a say in what they want, rather than like some other countries or cities that leaving for the like China to decide what we want for Hong Kong.
It's usually a sleepy election to select low-level local government positions, but many woke up early to vote as there was concern that unrest could mean the polling could be cut short.
For the pro-democracy camp, is about a vote of confidence or no confidence on the Carrie Lam government and on the excess use of police force against protesters. For the pro-Beijing camp, they would say this is also a de facto referendum on the protests and the violence.
By 1:30 in the afternoon, more voters had cast their ballots than the final count in the 2015 District Council election. There was an uneasy calm during the few days leading up to the election, just a week after some of the worst violence in these nearly 6 months of protests. That's mainly because both sides view this election as critical to their cause. Hong Kong's leader, Carrie Lam, while casting her vote, recognized the challenging times for the city and the importance of peaceful elections. Andrew Chu has served 3 terms as a district councillor. He's vying for his 4th. The pro-democracy candidate was brutally attacked earlier this month. Parts of his ear were bitten off.
Our election result can have a very strong and clear message to no matter for the Hong Kong government, the Beijing authority, and also the international community that we Hong Kong people stand firm together. We try to keep on fight for our freedom and democracy.
Even though more people voted than ever before, and this is a significant election, much more still needs to be done to mend the divisions in Hong Kong. Scott Heidler, Al Jazeera, Hong Kong.
Rob McBride is live for us now in Hong Kong. Rob, as we just heard, this is a record turnout. When are we likely to start to see some of the results coming in?
Absolutely, Stan. Within the next half hour or so, we are expecting to get the first of the exit polls to give us an idea of what this election is likely to look at. And then, as with any election, as we go through the early hours into the morning, we will start to get the results. In the last election 4 years ago, it wasn't until about 6 hours or so after the close of polls that we really had the final look of these district boards to find out the results of the election. But as you mentioned there, this has been setting records. The election results, the actual turnout figures we have were from about an hour or so ago. As you mentioned there, some 69% of registered voters had voted, which is something like 2.8 million people. But we've been looking at live feeds coming in from a couple of polling stations that were all closing their doors at 10:30 p.m. local time, the allotted time that for closing. And a couple of the polling stations still had people outside. They seemed to stay open for an extra couple of minutes just to allow those people to vote. So we could be seeing, and remember this is just a local election, we could be seeing a turnout of something like well over 70% by the time they have the final voting figures. It just gives you a sense, I think, of how politicized, how fired up this whole population is after all of this months of unrest, Stan?
Yeah, Rob, just a local election, but of course much more than that this year. And people have been saying, look, it's a litmus test. It's a referendum on Carrie Lam. Beijing watching on as well. And it's also a chance, isn't it, Rob, for people who are not on the streets, people we don't hear from, for their voices to be heard. It'll tell us a lot, won't it, about the mood in Hong Kong and the support for the protests and the pro or anti-Beijing sentiment.
Absolutely, and you'll have people on both sides will be looking to see what they can gain from this. The pro-Beijing camp will be saying that despite all the predictions that they have most to lose, and they do have 2/3 of the seats, and a lot of their councillors will lose their seats, that they accept that. But they are looking for a moderate bloc that will have looked at the violence and don't want to be associated with it, and will see the connections with the pro-democracy movement and stay with the pro-Beijing camp. That's what they're hoping for. But of course, people in the pan-democratic side will want this to be to send a message to the government here, but also to the government in China, that this is very much in support of this whole protest movement. Yes, we have 2 million people out on the streets voting with their feet, if you like. It makes a big difference when you have people going through a poll like this and actually seeing those numbers in an election like this across Hong Kong. Stan?
Rob, thank you. And as you say, half an hour until we see the first of those exit polls, watching those very, very closely. Thank you.